In this video, I'm going to get pretty controversial pretty quickly, I imagine. But before I drop a very divisive opinion, I want to explain what my plans are as they relate to that opinion. One of the general ideas I've had for this channel going forward was to slowly develop a historical primer alongside my own philosophical outlook in regard to martial arts. I wanted to do this not only to inform and entertain, but more practically so I could refer back to those videos in future work to provide context. Basically, the idea is that if someone doesn't understand where I'm coming from, I could pretty easily pull up a link for them to an older video, all while building a cohesive watch list. I've done some work on my historical primer, and I've dropped hints of my own philosophical perspective on the martial arts. But I have not really explicitly mentioned any of the core pillars that I use to really interrogate sources or the assumptions I make when putting together these videos. This video is the first in a series that will look under that hood. I've actually written and recorded this whole thing twice now, and both times it turned into a bloated 2-hour recording that, even after editing, I kept finding things that needed to be tweaked or added or removed. I'm not doing that anymore. But maybe at some later date, I'll just jam all this into a Tengu's Philosophy of Martial Arts 101 super edit or something. I don't know. So, what is the controversial statement that I mentioned? That statement, and the baseline belief I use in formulating a lot of my views, is that most people don't know what the hell they are talking about in the martial arts world. Now, I know that sounds pretty arrogant, but I'm actually not talking about professional fighters or coaches or even other martial arts YouTubers. In fact, martial arts YouTube is almost suspiciously grounded, whereas history YouTube, for example, is a lot more tolerant of bad research or even flagrant, unironic peddling of ideas that are so clearly just conspiracy theories or pet speculations on a good day. No, when I say most people don't know what they are talking about, I mean most rank and file dudes, most anonymous internet commentary, most popular discussion. These people have no idea what they're talking about, which is important because this faceless mass makes up a very respectable slice of how we tend to view martial arts on a cultural and social level. And I want to be clear that this isn't just my opinion. We can know this, or at least come very close to knowing this. Though numbers vary, in BJJ, somewhere between 50 and 90% of white belts quit, depending on how charitable you want to be. Then, at blue belt, another huge chunk of people quit. This is a big talking point in BJJ, and people frame this phenomenon in different ways, but very few BJJ talking heads point out that this isn't uniquely a BJJ phenomenon. Most martial arts, in schools that legitimately are interested in growing skill level at least, will have people be quitting by the time they reach an intermediate level. And it doesn't stop there. In fact, most people tend to quit new things around the intermediate level. My college Japanese 101 class had a fire hazard student population. Everyone and their grandma wanted to speak the sushi language or try to snag a big titty anime waifu or whatever. But by the time we hit Japanese 102, there were literally 12 of us left. The reason for why people quit, I think, is pretty straightforward. The intermediate level is when you stop benefiting from beginner gains. Suddenly, things get hard, and progress is going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of sacrifice, often very uncomfortably so. The intermediate level is when people need to ask themselves if they love this thing more than they hate the cost of becoming good at it. Most people, most of the time, simply don't like that calculus. That is fine, but more importantly to what I'm trying to say here is that this means MMA Skull Violator 420 in the YouTube comments section is, per the statistics, an intermediate level martial artist at best, and that is if they've trained at all. Now, yes, I acknowledge that sometimes there are experts that wander into the crowd, but since the internet is broadly anonymous, I think making assumptions based on the statistics is really the only reasonable choice. You might be thinking that this is me somehow gatekeeping, or that this is something that happens in every field of interest. But the martial arts community specifically has something that makes it at least a little bit different. Ever wonder how, despite the fact that there is no way that everyone is an expert, that the overwhelming number of people online like to portray themselves as one? My issue isn't really with hobbyists. I've mentioned again and again on this channel how I believe hobbyists are the backbone of martial arts. My issue is with amateurs poisoning the well with some of the most uninformed, unresearched, stinker takes that I've seen in any community. Sure, yes, this does happen in other communities too, but usually these kinds of takes are laughed at or are just tenuously tolerated. In the martial arts community, someone can say that they study Cambodian Kung Fu and have a black belt in their system without realizing that they've just outed themselves as either being clueless or being scammed. Maybe they are a great martial artist despite what they are saying, but my instinct is to suspect otherwise. Or someone will say that they have had street fights before, like that is somehow a litmus test for skill. First, those fights aren't verifiable, but even if they were, we don't know anything about the circumstances or quality of the parties involved. Maybe it means you know something, or maybe it means that you had 3 fights with 3 separate middle-aged drunks who were half your size. We just don't know. So probably you're making something up, or probably you're still not that good. Of course, there might be some people whose fights do indicate skill, but there's just no way of knowing. So again, I feel it reasonable to default to the stats. And this always leads back eventually to the take that competition is the only way to truly know the quality of a martial artist. Except no, that still isn't true, and it's still a pretty amateur take. Competition is a great way to verify the skill level of a fighter in a specific competitive context. If someone is an MMA champion, they are very skilled in MMA, and yes, a good martial artist, in fact. But there is this notion that floats around that quote unquote fighting is fighting. Except that isn't true. Being a phenomenal wrestler is different than being a phenomenal boxer, even though both would be phenomenal martial artists. Likewise, one of these guys whooping on the other in their preferred rule set is not a statement on the loser's quality as a martial artist. They are just fighting in a format they don't know. Or what about people like John Danaher, whose coaching ability, I would say, ranks him very highly as a successful martial artist. Yet plebeians, to this day, ask for his competitive record as if that has something to do with his martial arts achievements. What about the fight choreographer for Hollywood films who has never fought competitively in his life, but makes 6 figures a year from his job? Is he not, too, a very accomplished martial artist? More on the ground level, I know people who are not the greatest fighters and not at all competitors, but they have a very good eye for where martial arts is evolving and an unmatched martial creativity. Martial arts aren't equivalent to fighting, and fight records aren't the only way to assess someone's skill. The fact that this is how things are popularly viewed is, to me, just more evidence that people aren't actually thinking about martial arts. They are just mindlessly consuming. The root of all of this, though, I believe, is the troublesome notion that martial arts are for everyone and can be learned relatively easily and relatively quickly. I don't want to go into a long spiel about marketing too deeply here. That is a whole other video. But to some extent, this popular belief is certainly the fault of the martial arts industry. Putting that aside, here is the thing. It tends to take about 7 to 10 years of post-high school education to achieve a doctoral level in a given field. And even then, You're usually expected to publish quality things before you're considered an eminent voice in the community. Similarly, the trades often require 10 plus years before you can consider yourself a master carpenter, for example. 10 to 15 years is considered a normal pace for mastery over an instrument, 10 years for mastery of a language. And yes, these times can be inflated or deflated, depending on how many hours you squeeze into a week. The point is that for some reason, people think you can be a badass martial artist in like 3 years. You cannot. In fact, one of the great tragedies of martial arts mastery is that often by the time you achieve truly deep understanding, your body is too old and beaten to express it effectively. This is why I've always thought that martial artists actually usually peak in their late 30s, because this is when they are usually physically capable and when they have a deep understanding at the same time. Now, obviously, this doesn't mean they'll be able to do everything. They're approaching 40, but you get the idea. And this also obviously assumes that they started pretty young. Way back in the day, martial arts were thought of as a trade. Full stop. This is yet another topic for another video, but I think we need to get back to that a little bit. I'm not saying that there is no place for hobbyists. There are absolutely a place for hobbyists. I'm saying the martial arts industry really needs to be clear that the road to mastery is long, hard, and filled with personal sacrifice. This notion that you will get good in 3 years on 4 hours of training a week is nonsense. The idea that being intermediate level is licensed to act authoritatively in a field is nonsense. The idea that competition is the only lens through which to judge the quality of a martial artist is, again, you guessed it, nonsense. Yet, paradoxically, this is the crowd that martial artists primarily deal with. We can probably earn a lot more money if we play into their ignorance and let them feel as powerful as they think they are or think they should be after a short period of training. Or we can often risk driving them away with hard truths and, in some cases, actually harm our craft by driving too many away. It's walking a tightrope. It's a balancing act. My suggestion to people, which I understand is absolutely a futile shout into the void of cyberspace, is to be humble. It is fine to not know things. My math is abysmal, and honestly, as much as I see the utility in my foreign language skills, I often feel like I'm not cut out for it. I accept that, and you won't find me in any math or foreign language forums correcting Japanese or Mandarin or long-form math problems anytime soon. I assure you, I'm pretty awful, at least at math. I also recognize that it's the internet. There are trolls and 12-year-olds, and it's all anonymous chaos. Sure, I get that, but I've met some of these types in real life. I've met quite a few. Some subsection of the discourse really is being generated by these people, and my first assumption when I'm putting these videos together is that people don't know anything about the content at all. My second assumption is that people will still comment like they are experts because people are weirdly tied up in their ego when it comes to martial arts and their online personas. So that is pillar number 1 of my philosophy. Most people in popular discourse don't know what the hell they are talking about. And this isn't even going into a lot of the other fallacies that these people fall into, like, for example, familiarity bias. When people say BJJ is the best martial art ever, do you want to take a wild guess at what martial art that person probably does or at least has done in the past? I bet you it's BJJ. And there's other things too, like a bandwagon fallacy and so on and so forth. This video was just getting too long, and I'm not going to nitpick into every little crevice. But for what it is worth, I don't consider myself an expert either. I've done 23 years of karate and about 15 years of judo and aikido respectively, training each pretty intensely at one time or another, sometimes in Japan itself. I bring up wrestling, boxing, Muay Thai, and BJJ a lot, mostly because I've sparred a lot of people with those backgrounds, and sure, I have dabbled a little bit, but you'll never see me doing a detailed breakdown on those arts unless for a very, very specific reason, and even then, it would be accompanied by a disclaimer. There are better fighters out there than me. There are better historians out there than me. I'm fine with that. Not being fine with that would be hypocrisy on my part. I'm just some dude with a YouTube channel trying to present an uncommon perspective in a digestible package. It doesn't mean my views can't change or that they can't be wrong. Anyway, that is all from me for now. If you've gotten nothing from this video, just know that the guy who says he sees red and knocks out 12 dudes on a weekly basis in the comment section that you're talking to definitely doesn't. I've got several videos planned, but I'm moving out of this apartment. I've been sick like 4 times in 4 weeks, and it's the holidays to top it all off. I'm hoping that December is the gateway back into some normalcy in terms of uploads. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you again real soon. Peace.